Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. We've talked a lot in the past about upgrading or evolving the Modern Warfare meta and just in general the Modern Warfare weapons here in Warzone. It's a pretty clear fact that the MW guns feel the best. Obviously Warzone was built around them, so naturally they are not ported in like the Cold War Vanguard guns. They've got the cleanest animations, you know, the smoothest feel to them, and everyone seems to be big fans of the MW guns. However, as we know, Cold War guns and Vanguard guns have sort of been the forefront of the meta ever since we saw, you know, Verdansk 84 added into the game. MW guns have sort of been a thing of the past for quite some time, and we've talked several times about how we could upgrade the MW meta and make these weapons more competitive. Well, my friends, recently Raven Software actually ended up responding to the Modern Warfare meta in general and how they'd have to go about changing things and partially why they can't have certain Modern Warfare guns evolve in certain ways. So as we break all this down today, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel or if you have not already subscribed, every single day I got you covered with all things going on in Call of Duty, news, updates, loadouts, tips, you name it, you're gonna find it right here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. So this information is actually coming from Tully Auckland over on Twitter. He is the senior game designer at Raven. Shout out Tully. He's always super interactive over on Twitter and constantly talking about the meta and whatnot. And he actually gives us some really cool insight into how they are working on the meta and why certain things can't be done despite them being, you know, massive requests and highly requested things from the community. So it was asked a few days back if, you know, it was ever possible to have some Modern Warfare guns added back into the loot pool to mix things up, or expanding the loot pool in general, because obviously basically every season now it's just a couple of Vanguard guns, obviously some shotguns, which are always the worst ones to grab because they're just hit marker machines. You got things like the Type 11, the Marco, the Armaguerra in there, but it's not super diverse, right? And Tully ended up responding saying there's a couple of design reasons we typically limit the ground pool. The more there is, the more randomness that comes into what weapon you acquire, and they'd rather have it more restricted, if you will, and more defined. And keeping tabs on a smaller pool does help control the experience. That way, if there's anything that's like majorly broken out of nowhere, because obviously when they do update the game, things can randomly break here and there just because so much is packed into Warzone now. So basically that answer is saying when there is a larger weapon pool, there is more potential for problems to arise, and that takes then you know, focus away from improving the meta to having to fix things that ideally aren't broken when you have that more defined and more restricted ground loot pool. That said though, Tully goes on to say, that being said, there's also a technical concern of spawning so many variants into random loot, something I'd like to improve on so that we can go a little wider, because I would like to see some more variants there. So the devs do want to see this more expanded ground loot pool, but as we've talked about many times in the past, Warzone in its current state is beyond bloated because it was not planned to be a multi-year title, and because it is a third app essentially, or a third mode for the MW 2019 app. It is not built to handle everything it has in the game, between all the Modern Warfare content, all the Cold War content, all the Vanguard content. The devs have talked about this being a source for a lot of the game's problems because it is too bloated. So when you add in more blueprints and things to spawn in ground loot, that can cause a lot of problems on the technical side of things with frames, with stability, and all sorts of stuff like that. So unfortunately, just because of the state of Warzone and where we're at now, waiting for Warzone 2 essentially, there is limitations that they are basically stopped by because of the game being too bloated. But that's not everything Tully talked about when it comes to evolving and expanding and upgrading the Modern Warfare meta. Anyway, another thing that we've talked about several times on the channel in the past that is always something the community has been talking about really is upgrading certain Modern Warfare guns to make them more competitive. There is a very clear meta right now where many Modern Warfare guns are just left out because they cannot hang, they cannot compete. They are either too slow, the magazine capacity sucks, the recoil is too much, or all of the above, right? Specifically, you look at things like the Scar and the Odin, which with the right magazine size, with certain recoil upgrades, they would be very dominant. They have insane TTKs, but they're so limited that they're almost useless compared to some of the Cold War, and especially the Vanguard weapons, which obviously have 10 attachments and are no recoil laser beams. And something that we've always talked about in the past is, hey, what if you gave the Scar a 50-round mag? What if you upgraded the magazine capacity on the Odin, and suddenly you'd have weapons that were similar to like the OG AMAX that were hard to use because they had pretty rough controls, some worse mobility, but if you landed shots with these weapons, they would fry and a lot more players would use them. Essentially, the way this conversation came up is that because of the Season 4 Reloaded update, we saw a bunch of MW weapons adjusted, and someone asked if that also affects multiplayer, right? And Totally ended up responding to this saying, base weapon modifications are specific to Warzone. So anytime you see the Modern Warfare MP5 receives a damage buff, that's only for Warzone, that's not for multiplayer. However, any attachment changes they apparently do for Modern Warfare weapons are not specific to Warzone. So anything that they would change in Warzone on an MW gun, let's say they gave the Modern Warfare MP5 45 round mag a damage increase, that would then also apply to Modern Warfare multiplayer as well. And Totally explains that's why they refrain from touching an MW weapons attachments, because those are shared and they have to consider all of the multiplayer aspects in that case, hence why calls for magazine size increases can't be so easily done. If you gave these weapons like the Scar and the Odin insane mags for multiplayer, they could be incredibly broken, and obviously MW 2019 is not really a focus for keeping it up with new updates and weapon tuning. It's not really a focus at all with MW2 on the horizon now. So essentially, if they were to change any MW attachments, they'd be creating more work for themselves and having to then balance out multiplayer, which creates a whole new umbrella of issues, if you will. So unfortunate to hear that news, but it does actually give us a real answer as to why we haven't seen these things change on Modern Warfare weapons, despite, magazine size increases being requested pretty much ever since the Cold War era of Warzone, honestly. So we finally got answers. They might not be the ones you wanted to hear, but answers are here nonetheless as to why the MW meta has or has not evolved in certain ways over the past few seasons. Perhaps we continue to see some base MW upgrades though over the coming weeks and maybe throughout Season 5 to sort of prep for MW2 and bring some more hype back to some of the Modern Warfare weapons. Of course, for that, we're going to have to wait and see. But that being said, that is going to wrap things up for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, each and every single day, I got you covered with the latest news, updates, loadouts, leaks, tips, everything going on in COD. You're going to find it right here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. And as always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code WhosImmortal for a spicy discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, Gamer Advantage, and Control Freak products, and the links for all those can be found down in the description below. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.